Welcome to Prime Suspects, alongside Adam Bjorn, joining us from a boat in the Bahamas, as well as Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, looks like you're in paradise right now. It is a football Monday. You know what that means. Let's dig into NFL and college football results from this past weekend across Prime Sports and BetCris.
Great college football Saturday. Like one of the best Saturdays we've had, I think, for a while. Absolute disastrous Sunday, but we generally got out of the week okay, especially in New Jersey. Again, New Jersey's been great last 2, 3, 4 weeks. Ohio, not so much. Again, we're kind of one player resistant, and without that player, we actually had a winning week, but that player took us down for a nice tidy penny. But yeah, I mean, a wild weekend of results, a wild weekend of not seeing results yesterday afternoon, bits and pieces, connecting to a, cruise ship Wi-Fi on and off. And, just got the devices set up this morning and saw one score in particular that was, wow, I would have liked to watch that game.
Well, let's get to it, because while it was a roller coaster ride across Saturday and Sunday, it was smooth sailing, no pun intended, given your location today, across the Surface Survivor landscape, excluding those 440 intros on the Broncos, and especially that lone Grandissimo entry on Denver, in what may go down is the biggest sweat of the season. Adam, how did your entries fare this weekend?
Well, I had 2 through by the morning, KC an easy one, Cleveland, which, was a easy one in the end, but I had 2 on Denver. So I saw 19-8, and then I saw 26-8, and then I saw 26-14 or 16 or something like that. And that was it. That was the last score I saw, and I thought I had 2 survivors left, but apparently I've got 4. So yeah, I went through it just like 30 minutes ago, saw the final score. Not much to say on that one, but holy crap, what a last 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it was, because there was literally not enough time on the clock when I even saw 26-16 or something. It felt like there was no coming back, and I switched it off and moved on with the day. And yeah, so I currently got all 4 through, including Cleveland, which, many questioned, but I was surprised 180 odd other people followed me in there. But yeah, still alive with the full 4th that I entered the weekend with.
I feel like we could spend the next 2 hours rehashing the final 2 minutes of that Broncos-Giants game. But before we go down that rabbit hole, Joe, I want to bring you into the fold here. Shifting gears to baseball, the Dodgers back in the World Series after sweeping the Brewers, with Shohei Ohtani delivering what many are calling the greatest performance of all time in the clincher, hitting 3 homers and striking out 10 across 6+ scoreless innings last Friday. How do you rate Ohtani in the all-time discussion? Who do you think takes the winner-take-all matchup between the Mariners and Blue Jays tonight? And what do you anticipate in the World Series?
I wish everybody would quit with the recency bias that Shohei Ohtani is the greatest ball player in the history of baseball player. He put in a pretty epic performance. Have there been people who've had more home runs in a playoff game? Sure, Reggie Jackson. Have there been people who have had, better pitching performances? Yeah, Roy Halladay. Putting them both together, yeah, that's pretty good, but he did only go 6 innings, pitching-wise. The other thing is like, if this guy's the greatest bat since Babe Ruth, why did he go only 151 against the Phillies? I mean, the only thing colder than the Phillies bats was Ohtani. I mean, he had all of 1 RBI in that series. So I think Ohtani's got to do a little more before people start putting that crown on top of him and things like that. But in the meantime, tonight's game, the decider between Blue Jays and Mariners, I've been riding Mariners the whole time. I like to see Big Dumper go and show Ohtani how you really hit, and that's from both sides of the plate. So I'm going to be in the tank for Mariners on that one.
All right, not the take I was expecting for Shohei Ohtani, but I probably should have known better coming to you with that question. I guess 3 unanimous MVP awards, possibly a 4th coming up, is just not quite enough.
No. Sorry. Look, again, recency bias, okay? And maybe it's because I'm an old man who's been watching baseball for over 50 some odd years. I have a different take on it, but is he the best? I mean, he was the best that day, but he didn't even pitch a complete game. So watching Roy Halladay pitch a no-hitter in the playoffs, that's a little better, So anyway.
All right, well, from the World Series and the biggest betting market there is in baseball to small market college basketball, Joe, we'll stick with you. A report by David Purdom of ESPN has confirmed a pattern of suspicious bets by a syndicate on small conference college basketball games last season. What do you make of this story as we approach next Monday's tip-off for the 2025-26 season?
A, the system is working, and B, the media is going to kill us for this because it becomes down to like what came first, the chicken and the egg. What came first, betting or point shaving? We don't know that it is definitively point shaving yet. Sure is looking an awful lot like it. It breaks my heart to see my Temple University in there in the mix of this discussion. But this is the danger when you're offering betting on games that are beyond what we would, the big conference games. When you start getting down there into those smaller conferences, because there's 325 teams that play Division I college basketball right now, and most of those teams do not have the NIL deals and the sponsorship deals and things like that. So let's be honest, like college basketball has always been susceptible to point shaving. Now, the fact that the system's working and that they've caught this, that they're investigating this and potentially punishing this means, we did not promise when we did this that people were going to be pure, but what we did promise was that we were going to police this, and it seems like we are policing this effectively. So I'm not happy about it. I don't think anybody's covered in glory by it, but I'm glad Dave's on top of it with his reporting. I remember him calling around last year early in the college basketball season for takes on this and data on this. So he's been out in front of this more than I think IC360 has been, and good on him for doing that.
And Adam, we almost made it through a water cooler segment without using the K word, but we'd be remiss not to acknowledge Kalshi's outage for more than an hour during Saturday's college football slate. The website was inaccessible, but the API still operated, leading many to claim market makers and institutional traders had an unfair advantage. How would you describe your experience managing downtime from your side of the counter? How should betting platforms respond during these moments? And how do you assess Kalshi's handling of Saturday's outage?
So just before we get onto that one, just going back to the previous one with the ESPN, the college basketball and stuff like that. Yes, I'd heard stuff about Temple. Like when I saw the headline that you had sent through, I was going to ask, was it Temple? And then sure enough, within the article, Temple was mentioned. I have to realize, these are probably some of the most inefficient lines in gambling, in sports betting, completely across the board, especially first halves, things like that. So when they see, someone come in with $300 bets, where's the carve up of that? Who's getting a piece of that and whatnot? Excessive amounts, $2,500, $1,700, same kind of thing there. I know they've kind of tied it to some nefarious old fellas that are into other things and whatnot, but this is very small potatoes in the world of point shaving or fixing or anything of this nature. And as Joe said, there's actually progress in the fact that they're finding these things. They're finding these players. Caesars are tying them all together. US Integrity are tying them all together. The investigations and all those kind of things are tying them together. But when I read an article like that, I kind of laugh my ass off because this is small potatoes in the world of sports betting and even millions of dollars getting moved through these kind of things. When in Asia and those other aspects of the world, more with a B than an M. But yes, there's more positive and upside of an article like this than negative. And I hope that the media, the regulators, whoever else is involved in this actually understands that this is a good thing. When Joe and that got it through, they didn't know the unsavory world of sports betting and all the other things that can happen that I've seen for 20, 30 years. But this is all good progress in American sports betting, in American sports, in college sports, and, player props. And the depth of betting today is insane. And we recently heard the MGM CEO talk about micro betting. Well, get ready, girls and boys. Micro betting is the optimal spot to spot fix, match fix, all those kind of things. So if you're going to go down that path, be ready to clutch your pearls because there's going to be more of this coming along. And the upside is they're actually diving into this. The data world today is finding these connected players. And connected players, again, have existed globally now for 30, 40 years. I remember when cricket bettors from India were doing this in the 90s, having people at each of the grounds all around the world getting weather updates. When you bet on a test match, weather becomes a factor. So when you have the groundskeepers and how a pitch is rolled and all these kind of things, This is all good reporting, all good information, all progressive forward steps to actually seeing this a lot earlier. Because 10, 15 years ago, you would have heard about these college happenings maybe in 4 or 5 years when someone, decided to spill the beans or speak out and whatnot. As for Kalshi, it's hard being a technical company. I've lived on both sides of the counter, and for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been dealing with, DBAs and DevOps managers and deployees and all this kind of stuff, uptime, SLAs, and all these other aspects in this world. It's tough. So, having a bit of downtime on a Saturday afternoon, when if we go back a few years, that first Super Bowl post-PASPA, when literally every sportsbook in the US tanked it Super Bowl Sunday, give them a break. This is hard work. Was there some advantages and who knows? We're guessing from the outside without knowing what really happened behind the curtain and, within the dynamic of that world. But give them a break. I mean, they're, a 6-month-old kitten kind of thing and just pissing on the floor and going to make some mistakes and, not go to the kitty litter. But I'm going to give them a break in this sense, go easy on them. Shit happens. The technical aspect of this business is a hell of a lot harder than I would have guessed 5, 6 years ago. We've had a mess over the last 4 to 6 weeks. BetCris, our client in LATAM, has been up our kind of having downtime 10 minutes before Champions League games and stuff like this. It's tough. I would just let it be. They're a work in progress and move forward with them and give it an opportunity to sort of earn back, the issues that they may have ran into on the weekend.
Well, I didn't have kitty litter on my bingo card for this week's episode, but I did have prediction markets, so we'll stay in that lane. Joe, Sportico recently published a story focusing on the downstream effects the rise of prediction markets could have on the regulated betting supply chain. The article focused on geolocation providers whose services aren't currently required under the CFTC model. Where does this fall in your eyes between existential threat to suppliers in the regulated industry and overblown threat at this stage?
Well, it's certainly an existential threat to GeoComply and Radar and Xpoint. But at the same time, it's kind of paradoxical in that, look, we'll just use GeoComply as an example. GeoComply got really big because they made an early bet on kind of legalized gambling that we would have online here in the US. And David and Anna, they were there, day one, and they were putting the money into the lobbying and they were upfront. And their innovation wasn't their technology, it was their licensing. And some would argue the length and terms of their contracts as well. Their technology was hardly what I would consider, or what many would consider, state of the art. And this is where this paradox about coming into the US regulated gaming industry, there's lots of companies that have been interested in doing things. And in particular, I use the example of geolocation, like here, headquartered in Washington, D.C., which is cybersecurity capital of the planet, frankly, a company named Comtech. Now, Comtech, for one example, they are the supplier for geolocation for the state of New Jersey's 911 system. That has to be pretty hyper accurate, doesn't it? But when they started looking at it, of course they had interest in it, and they had people in New Jersey government were saying like, hey, you guys ought to get into it. And they were interested in it. But then when they started looking at well, wait a second, this is everything that we have to do to be able to participate in this new nebulous market, all of the licensing and testing and all their shareholders happen to get investigated and things like that. And in the end, Comtech said, yeah, we're not really interested in that. We're not, it's too much trouble. And there's not enough, juice from the squeeze in order to participate in the market. So the irony is that a company like GeoComply was able to dominate this industry, what we'll say less than the state-of-the-art technology, but it was because they were willing to go through that crucible of licensing and suitability. So what might be interesting to see is if, oddly enough, if this Kalshi CFTC, 50 state model holds, how many companies that have been suppliers on everything from KYC, AML, identity, anti-fraud, geolocation, things like that, may be willing now to bring their state-of-the-art technology into the marketplace and make it available for us to use, because they don't have to go through these onerous state by state licensing requirements that they so far have not been willing to go through.
All right, and Adam, college football week 9 and NFL week 8 lines are now posted. Which games are you monitoring most closely, and where have you seen the most early action?
So nothing jumped out on the college football, but I was really surprised at the NFL numbers. There's a shit ton on Cincinnati. Already 6 figures, clearly, -4.5, -6, heavy master action. The Jets get a sniff at +7.5, but yeah, it was when I've not seen a chart like that so heavy on a Monday as we've sort of, logged in and gotten ready for this. The other one, looking at Ravens, 75% of the money on them, -5.5, -6.5 for the big numbers. On the master money, the Bears, 7% of the money on them, the bulk of it at +7. Both of these got to, found their trend, going hard one way and then found some action the other way. Cowboys, Broncos, great volume, both plus and -3, both way action, volume on that, well-balanced book. And then the other one was the Eagles, -5.5, -6, -6.5, -7, all got bet hard. And then there was a sniff on the Giants at +7.5 as well. So this is probably the heaviest charts I've seen on a Monday for NFL when I've sort of prepped for this, call each week.
Sounds like a pretty heated battle to price discovery with some two-way action on a lot of these matchups, or at least trying to find a point of resistance for some of the teams taking a lot of early money. And Adam, also don't want to lose sight of the fact that the NBA season tips off tomorrow. Any noteworthy futures exposure you've seen thus far? And how do you expect this season's handle to compare to last year's?
I think there'll be good handle. I think this seems like a pretty open season. There was some sort of standout action I saw at big odds. Portland Trail Blazers to win their conference, being betted like 200 to 1, all the way down to 90s. Significant money, really bad position on them right now. Hopefully they hold up to the odds that they are and don't give us a scare. The other one in the West was the Golden State Warriors getting some action. Not as much action on the Eastern Conference, but Celtics, Nets are kind of the big losers there. And then as we get into the NBA championship, Golden State Warriors and the Portland Trail Blazers are currently the big standout positions on those two right now. So nothing big losing on the East. They're both coming, fight their way in the West. But yeah, Portland Trail Blazers at really big odds have been hit heavy early on. And the Warriors, again, showing up with some solid money.
All right, well, building on that, I will lob a jump ball to both of you, pun intended this time. Who do you think wins each conference and ultimately claims the NBA championship this season?
Well, I'll jump in here first since mine will be entirely a prediction, not odds based. I mean, as many people have said, like somebody's got to win the East. Nobody really looks dominant. I could see it playing out for Knicks fans that they do make it to the finals only to lose, because that would be most painful for them. And I think they probably would have had a clearer shot last year were it not for injuries earlier in the playoffs. But I'm kind of curious that like more action's not being thrown at the defending champion here right now, defending champion and league MVP. So until they get knocked off, because in the NBA, repeat champions are definitely a thing. I could see OKC being in the finals as well, and OKC winning it again for be repeat champions.
All right, I'll jump in for a moment because I have a similar thought to you, Joe. First off, I will be rooting hard for my Mariners-Dodgers World Series prediction to come to fruition, pending ALCS Game 7 tonight. I had some decent conviction there. This will be by far my least informed of our predictions thus far on this show. Wanted to have a little fun, maybe quiet, some critique on West Coast bias on my part, and go Knicks over the Nuggets. So, Adam, I'll toss it over to you, thinking that in the NFL, we were unanimous on Buffalo coming out of the AFC. In baseball, entering the postseason, we were unanimous on Seattle coming out of the American League. It's up to you to decide whether or not in the NBA we're unanimous once again when it comes to the Knicks and the Eastern Conference.
Well, I have absolutely no idea of any of these teams or any of this league or any of this thing. I have been so up to my ears with so many things in recent times. The NBA has purely caught me unaware. And when it comes to OKC, it's hard for anybody to lay down, money on those current odds. They're definitely a worthy favorite. They're definitely a short price favorite. You won't get anyone sort of putting up money at this early on unless they can, parlay them up into something else. So that's sort of not expected that they're, a winner for the house right now. I think laying, plus 250, plus 230 or something in the market. But yeah, NBA is a grind, just like baseball's a grind, but I tune into the baseball when it comes to the playoffs. NBA will be the same. I'll probably start tuning in, maybe around All-Star break, looking for some sort of trades or positions to get on early. And then, but next year is such a big year, such a hectic year that NBA will go pretty much unnoticed for me for the next 4 or 5 months. Football season, everything else, getting ready for the World Cup, which was kind of our product and tech conversations last week when we sort of had everyone all hands on deck kind of thing of what do we need to do to make sure we're ready for the World Cup? How do we get more players in New Jersey, Ohio, Arizona, Kentucky? We've had some of those Kalshi problems on the technical level over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but we did some really good work in the summer as well to sort of make sure we didn't have some of those troubles from last year with disconnections and games as they pivot from pre to live. But yeah, good luck to whoever it is. I'm sure I'll be more in tune with the NBA come February, March. And when the playoffs begin, I'm sure I'll have a prediction by then, or at least a betting position, because that's generally what ends up being my prediction anyway, is when I've laid down a bet. And right now I haven't had a penny on anything.
If you're listening out there, kids, what does this mean? Bet the NBA early at Prime and at BetCris because Adam's not paying attention. So there's probably some soft numbers out there to be had, right?
And to those opportunistic bettors, enjoy the start of basketball season and the return of Round Ball Rock as the greatest theme song in sports, courtesy of the NBA on NBC. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.